Welcome to the world this week. I'm Joe Loria, the editor-in-chief of Consortium News. This week, Iran. Will Trump recklessly pull the trigger? And Israel, at what cost to the Israeli state? Our guest tonight is Scott Ritter, a former UN Chief Weapons Inspector, a U.S. Marine Corps counterintelligence officer, author, and columnist. With the world on the brink of a major Middle East war, we will discuss the rationale, the conduct, and the likely outcome of a devastating conflict between Iran, backed by Russia and China, versus the United States and Israel. Welcome, Scott, to the program.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Okay, Scott. A lot of people are comparing this buildup we're seeing in the Middle East region of U.S. forces to the Gulf War of 1991, the first Gulf War, and particularly the second Gulf War of 2003. George Bush Sr. in the first, his son in the second, and of course you had a lot to do with the second one. But I want to ask you about the comparisons, what we're seeing today. For example, in the first Gulf War, the H.W. Bush administration went to the UN Security Council and got a resolution. Now they did arm twisting. They told Yemen that it was the most expensive vote if they would ever cast if they voted against the United States. But they did get a UN Security Council resolution. There was also a stated reason that Saddam had invaded Kuwait and needed to be expelled. And Bush put together a 35-nation coalition. In the second Gulf War, 12 years later in 2003, his son, he lied about the reasons for the war, about the weapons of mass destruction, which, of course, you are the top expert on that issue. It was really about regime change. They never said that. They failed in trying to get a UN Security Council resolution, and they only were able to get Australia and Poland to join the U.S. and the U.K. as opposed to the 35 nations. This time, they're not even lying about this. They're not saying much at all. They are saying, Vance said the other day that again about Iran seeking a bomb. They're not even attempting to go to the UN for a Security Council resolution. There is no coalition whatsoever. It's just Israel and the United States. And Bush made efforts. Both Bushes explained to the public why they were going to war. There was actually meetings in Congress in both times about this. That has not happened. What's the difference here, Scott? And what does this mean over these 35 years of where we've come to when the U.S. is about to launch an incredibly dangerous major war in the Middle East?
Well, I was also a big part of the first Gulf War. I actually
Right.
fought in it, and was part of very senior levels of planning. Um, and the interesting thing was that the United States understood the responsibilities of leadership and understood also the responsibility of uh, you know constitutional due process. Um, we went to the Security Council and we got a Chapter 7 resolution, I believe in November of 1990, that authorized the use of military force to liberate Kuwait. Um, then the United States Congress began debating this, and I think 5 days before the bombing began, 4 or 5 days, passed a resolution authorizing the use of military force to implement this resolution. Now, what we have here is a clear-cut case of a legal war. It doesn't make it a just war, but it makes it a legal war. It makes it a war that conforms with the rule of law of the United Nations Charter and conforms with constitutional due process. And I guess, we didn't win that war. I think half the problem was the unresolved nature of that conflict. You know, we said it was for the liberation of Kuwait, but the reality was is for regime change. In October of '90, George Herbert Walker Bush gave a speech, I think in Cleveland, I'm not exactly sure, where he compared Saddam Hussein to Adolf Hitler and said that for the crime of the invasion and occupation of Kuwait, um, Saddam Hussein deserved Nuremberg-like retribution. Now, once you do this, I mean, words have meaning, and now we're trapped in this. And we did our darndest to get rid of them, but when the war when the time came, we were bound by the legal construct of the argument of liberating Kuwait, and Kuwait had been liberated. But then we moved on into this whole mess. What made the weapons of mass destruction issue particularly troublesome is that it was a manufactured issue, um, meaning that we had a problem at the end of the Gulf War. Saddam Hussein still was alive. How do we get rid of him? We had sanctions imposed on Iraq because of the invasion and occupation of Kuwait, which legally should have been lifted once Kuwait was liberated. But we needed the sanctions to be in place because the CIA, and I remember the estimate very well, came in and said, Saddam will be gone in 6 months if we can keep the sanctions in place. We just need a vehicle. So they said, well, what if we do this whole weapons of mass destruction thing? We'll say you have to get rid of your weapons of mass destruction. We don't expect him to do this, but it doesn't matter. Within 6 months, he'll collapse and it'll all be done. And so they passed this resolution and created this inspection organization that was never supposed to really do anything other than go through the motions of, inspecting. I remember the summer of 1992 when, the United States was confronted with the reality that we, the inspectors, were actually going to do our job. And when the Iraqis were lying, we were going to confront them with the lie. And we surrounded the Ministry of Agriculture, where documents, archive of documents were hidden. And the United States basically said, we're not willing to enforce the Chapter 7 resolution. We don't want a war. Inspections can't be used to trigger a war, and they undercut the whole inspection regime. It was a very Ambassador Pickering at the time, a
Yeah.
very, very, very troublesome turn of events for we the inspectors, and that's when I got unleashed. I mean, after that incident is when Rolf Achaeus unleashed me to begin a very aggressive campaign to get Iraq to admit that it was not in compliance. And it led to a series of confrontations. But now we're heading down a cycle where the United States gets into this cycle of confrontation backing down, confrontation backing down, confrontation backing down. And it's relevant to today because, come 1997, when I did one of my infamous confrontational inspections trying to get into a presidential palace, had guns put in my face, threatened to kill me and my team. And, the United States surged military force into the region. And the Pentagon put Clinton on notice, said, we can't do this forever. This is very expensive. The next time we surge forces, we have to use them, or we have to stop doing this altogether. And this led to the March confrontation at the Ministry of Defense headquarters, where Richard Butler, I think I've told you this before, had colluded with Madeleine Albright to set up a crisis. And the infamous briefing in Ambassador Richardson's office, where he said, Scott, I'm ordering you to create a crisis here on this date so the bombs can begin falling on this date. And I went, wait a minute, I'm an inspector. You're ordering me to carry out an inspection on this date, correct? Well, yes, of course, but we know what's going to happen. But it's very important to be done on this date. And I said in front of them that I will do my job. And if the Iraqis choose not to cooperate, that's on them. But I'm not here to create a crisis. I'm here to do an inspection. And as it turned out, I prevented a war by doing my job. Madeleine Albright was extraordinarily mad at me, and that was the end of my career as a weapons inspector. But the point is, the whole weapons of mass destruction issue was always a lie attached to a policy of regime change. And regime change is political in nature. And we saw this in the Second Gulf War. There was no reason to go to war other than the United States had a vision of the region, of the Middle East region, where regimes that were incompatible with the American vision would be removed. If you remember Wesley Clark's infamous 7 nations in 7 years thing, and it was supposed to begin with Iraq, with the removal of Saddam Hussein was going to lead to a cascade of other issues. And so the W&D was a lie. but how do you sell this? As you said, there was no traction at the Security Council. The Security Council was decidedly split on the issue of Iraq by this time, with Russia, France, and China on one side, Great Britain, the United States on the other, and
Germany.
never the two shall
Forgot
meet.
Germany
Germany
was a
was that,
non-permanent member. They also joined with France and Russia and China.
yeah, well, old Europe. I mean, Donald Rumsfeld,
Right.
old Europe, New Europe, Poland joining with the United States and Great Britain. Um, so this is a war based on a lie. Uh, what was interesting is the role of Congress. The role of Congress in the first Gulf War was a very serious role, extraordinarily serious role. The debates that took place were serious debates, and there was not it was not a sure thing that Congress was going to support George Herbert Walker Bush's desire to go to war. On this one, as you looked at what Congress did, it was Lugar and Biden, I guess, at the Senate Foreign Relations Committee that set up these hearings that were just a kangaroo court. They brought in witness after witness after witness to talk about weapons, and it was all a lie. Khidr Hamza, Richard Butler came to testify. The one person they wouldn't let testify was me. They specifically said, "You're not allowed to come and testify," because they didn't want the truth. They didn't want, reality there, and they cooked up this case, and then Congress gave a politicized vote. So the politicization of war, the politicization of regime change. And next thing you know, we invade Iraq in March of 2003. Now we fast forward to today. It's once again a regime change operation. That's all this is about. This is about regime change. The policy of the United States is regime change. The nuclear program is a weak subterfuge. When you have Tulsi Gabbard coming out and saying there is no nuclear weapons program, and the president being dismissive of that, the bottom line is there is no nuclear weapons program in Iran. But this isn't about that. And we're not even trying to make it about that. This is about regime change. Take a look at what's happening. This whole provocation with Scott Bessent triggering the collapse of the rial, and the purpose was to put people in the streets. He says it. We did it without a shot being fired. People in the streets. And then we build upon that as an excuse to come to the assistance of the Iranian people to remove Khamenei from power, which is, Donald Trump has said he has to go. He's talked about killing him. I wouldn't sleep in the same place 2 nights in a row because you'll die. I mean, we're openly talking about killing the supreme leader of Iran. We're talking about decapitation strikes, etc. And that's it. We're not trying to go to the Security Council. There's no pretense. And we're not trying to go to Congress and get congressional support. This is a straight up dictatorial war. This is a war being waged by a cult of personality. This isn't even an American war because no American could support this except those who have given their loyalty not to the Constitution but to Israel. And so now we come to the real crux of the problem: Israel. I mean, Israel was behind every single one of these wars that we fought. The reason why we had to go after Saddam Hussein at the end of the first Gulf War, because Israel, a lot of people don't realize this. When the war ended, the Israelis held a cabinet meeting, and they said, "We don't trust the weapons inspectors. The only way we're going to get Iraq to conform is to kill Saddam." And they began preparing the assassination of Saddam Hussein at that point in time. And they almost pulled it off in the fall of 1993, except for a failed training exercise. They were going to kill Saddam Hussein in the fall of 1993. It was only after the failure that again, not to toot my, but I went to Israel and I told them there's a better way to do this, and actually trust the inspectors to do our job. And we were able to get the Israelis to support the inspections, but Israel wanted to kill Saddam. It was all about killing Saddam because it's all about Israeli security. Everything we do is about Israeli security. To include what we're doing today, Israel has made a determination that its vision of greater Israel is incompatible with the existence of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And so therefore the Islamic Republic of Iran must go, must be eliminated. And that's what's taking place. The American soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines are about to go into harm's way and die, not because they're defending the American way of life, they're defending democracy, they're defending the Constitution, they're defending freedom. because they're defending an Israeli um, Zionist imperial plan, vision. And if you're an American and your stomach isn't churning right now, if you're not ready to vomit from what I just said, then you're not much of an American. And that's the other problem. I'll leave it at this. We suck as a nation. We suck as a people. We have failed. We keep saying Congress failed, the president failed, everybody. We failed. We failed. When how many Americans actually know what the Constitution is? I mean, they know it exists, but have read it. You know, how many have read, the Federalist Papers? And I bring it up because, Federalist 10 and Federalist 51 are so relevant to what's happening today. Factionalism and, the slide towards tyranny is exactly what the founding fathers warned about. But because we, the people, haven't familiarized ourselves with the foundational arguments, we're not there to defend. And we sit back and we do nothing while the government slides in the direction of totalitarianism and our nation slides into the direction of factionalism. We no longer function as a nation. We function as a series of factions that are used to intimidate and produce political results. This Iran war may go down in history not just as a war that is destructive to the entire region and world, but it could be the death knell of the constitutional republic of the United States. Because if we go to war without even an effort by Congress to pretend, at least in 2003, Congress pretended that the Constitution mattered. Today, Congress just straight up says it doesn't matter. So this is a big deal that we've been seeing a slide away from American values. Again, I understand where people can say the 1991 Gulf War was unjust and all that. I get it. There's an argument there. But what you can never say about the 1991 Gulf War was that it was an illegal war. It was the most legal war that's been fought in modern history.
Well, certainly since the Second World War. Scott, this is the most openly naked aggression as you could possibly have. They're not even giving the BS about spreading democracy,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. It's all, it's not that, nor is it being personalized. You mentioned how Bush gave that speech in Ohio that Saddam was Hitler. Every time you hear an American president open their mouth and say someone's Hitler, they're going to try to overthrow them. Noriega was Hitler. Milosevic was Hitler. Of course, Saddam was Hitler. Putin is Hitler. They're trying to overthrow his regime, his government. So that's a right dead giveaway right there. But this is not personalized this way. I don't hear Trump talking about the Ayatollah or even the president of Iran. Why is we not hearing that when we heard Saddam, 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 Saddam is the way Bush said it, father.
Well, the problem is if you personalize it, then you create issues that have to be examined. Um, we're just saying that Iran is a threat to Israel. I mean, we claim a nuclear bomb that we know doesn't exist. We know they're not trying for it. The real issue is the other two. There's three, main categories that the Trump administration is saying Iran must change their behavior in order to survive. One is, of course, their nuclear program. Zero enrichment is the Israeli standard, therefore the American standard. But the next one, and it's almost comical, that Iran has to give up its ballistic missile capability, especially missiles that can reach Israel. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. The only reason why Iran is still here today is because of a ballistic missile capability and missiles that can reach Israel. It's actually quite an effective deterrence. And so, we're basically saying Iran must commit suicide. And then the next one is that Iran has no right to have any spheres of interest or influence in the region. This is a very large nation with 90 million people, and they're not allowed to have a sphere of influence, especially if that sphere of influence, collides with the greater Israel that Netanyahu is pushing. Iran is truly one of the only sovereign nations in the region. The Gulf Arab states have all caved. There's just zero sovereignty there. The Abrams Accords is one of the greatest sellout programs in the history of the of the region. Iran is the only nation that stands for. I mean, we can say the Houthi, but they're a faction within a Yemen that's divided and going through a civil war. But as a nation, a member of the United Nations, Iran is a sovereign state that stands for what it stands up and defends what it believes in. What it believes in isn't bad. It just runs counter to Greater Israel, and that's why Iran is being condemned right now, because Iran has the ability to stand up to Israel and push back, and that can't be allowed. The Iran we want will be governed by people who will immediately sign up for the Abrams Accords, forego all sovereignty, and basically behave the way Israel and the United States want them to behave. And who are we to dictate that outcome? This is the other thing that's shocking. I mean, I don't understand why Americans. I mean, I know we're arrogant. I know that, uh, but at some point in time, even the most arrogant people have to respect the sovereignty of other nations, especially a nation like Iran with centuries of culture and history and tradition. Um, but we don't. We have no respect for them whatsoever. And tragically, we're going to end up going to war. I had a conversation the other day with an Iranian journalist. She reached out to me. She's interviewed me several times, and she said, when they attack, are they going to try and kill Iranian journalists? She works for the state. I said, yes, they will, because you're broadcasting a message that we don't want to hear. And she said, great, I'll be dead at 27. It's one of the saddest things I've ever heard. I mean, who are we? If we call ourselves human, who are we to do this to this girl? And her interviews weren't state propaganda. They're some of the finest examples of journalism. I mean, trying to hear all sides of the story, to explore, to dig deep. She truly was doing a journalistic job, and it's going to possibly cost her her life, because we've decided that her country is incompatible with our vision of what Israel's vision. That's the other thing we have to stop. We have to stop talking about America, because this is all Israel. I mean, if we were being honest, we'd replace the American, insignias on aircraft, to just put the Star of David, and just be straight up honest. Just take down the American flag, put up the Israeli flag. This isn't an American armada. This is an Israeli armada. We're doing the bidding of Israel, and every American that dies should be buried with an Israeli flag on their coffin, not an American flag. That's how despicable this is, openly despicable this is.
Before we move on, I want to go over a few points you made. You said that Pickering, and I remember Thomas Pickering, and I was at Security Council in those days, and he was H.W. Bush's ambassador. You're saying that he and the George H.W. Bush administration did not want to use inspections as a pretext for overthrowing Saddam? Is that what you said, or I got you wrong? I got it wrong.
No, when they created the inspections, the goal wasn't to trigger a war.
Right.
The goal was to sustain sanctions that would lead to the collapse of the regime. They were looking for
Okay.
the easy solution. Um, and when it became clear that Iraq wasn't going away, that Saddam wasn't collapsing, um, they didn't know what to do, because they woke up one day and found out that there was these weapons inspectors that actually took their job seriously, and that we weren't willing to just go knock on the door and be gentleman Jim. We created an intelligence cell. That's why I was brought in. They said, your job is to, now go dig out the intelligence to where they're hiding the weapons. And the U.S. government hated that idea. They said, no, no, you don't do it. We tell you where to go. And we had a boss who said, no, you don't. We're the United Nations. And by the summer of 1992, the United States came face to face with the fact that the inspections were out of control, that we were actually doing things, and there were consequences. The Iraqis were stopping us, and the Security Council would be called upon to, uphold its resolutions. And the United States wasn't ready for this. They were not ready for this at all. So it wasn't until actually the Clinton administration that we were able to get the U.S. government to start putting muscle behind the inspections.
Well, a hell of a lot of muscle. What you said was, as opposed to the first Bush administration, they wanted to let the inspections lead to military strikes, at least, if not a
On several
full-scale
occasions. I
war,
mean,
right?
look, in 1996, I led a team into Iraq that we were taking on the presidential palaces, and the whole purpose of the inspection was to trigger a conflict. What I didn't know at the time is that the CIA had implanted a dozen paramilitary operatives from Special Activities Group on my team who were in communication with Iraqi um, special forces who were willing to betray Saddam. And about a week before we put our team in, the Iraqis surrounded the battalion, 3rd Battalion of the Special Republican Guard, and arrested the totality of the battalion, executed their leadership because they were all CIA hacks. And when the CIA showed up, as the team was on the ground, um, the David Manners, I believe his name, the chief of station in Jordan, was overseeing the communications with the network of people that the Iraqis had compromised. And the phone rang, and it was the Mukhabarat that said, "We've killed everybody. We control everything. Goodbye," and hung up the phone. And I wasn't aware of any of this at the time. I was in there leading the team, but the Iraqis knew all the CIA guys on my team, and they were monitoring what they were doing. And I remember the Iraqis confronting me later on. I used to go for in the hotel we'd stay. An Iraqi general would come in. He worked for Tariq Aziz, and he'd go, "Let's go for a walk." And so we take the long walk. And one day we took the long walk, and then we went into an alley. And he said, "What role did you play in what happened?" I said, "What do you mean? I was chief weapons inspector." He said, "No. Were you aware?" I said, "Well, I'm aware now." He said, "Were you aware at the time?" This is very important. And like, if I answered wrong, maybe I don't come out of that alley. But but they needed to know because they always accused me of being CIA, but it was always political. But this one was like, you were in charge, and there were 12 guys there to kill our president. Their job was to kill our president. What role did you play in this? And the answer was no role. I mean, I was simply being used by them just like they use everybody. But this was under Clinton. I mean, Clinton gave the CIA strict orders to get rid of Saddam Hussein in 96, 97.
I believe that story was eventually about the CIA infiltrating your team was, I think, exposed by my colleague Colin Lynch of the Washington Post, if I recall. He did something about the CIA. I don't know if it was as far as going there to assassinate Saddam. But now to put a focus again on the Clinton administration, you had a meeting, you said, with Richardson, who was the UN ambassador at the time, and Madeleine Albright, who was Secretary of State. Where did that meeting take place? In the UN
Well,
mission,
we had
US mission across the street?
that meeting took place in the U.S. mission across the street. It was set up by a series of meetings because I had gone into Iraq in January to lead a team, and the Iraqis just stopped us on day one, shut it down because we were on to something, and they just stopped and they said, "We won't allow Scott Ritter, we won't allow Americans, we won't allow Brits back in. They're all spies." Um, and we came back and said, "Well, if we allow this to go forward, it's the end of the inspections. I mean, the Iraqis get to dictate the composition of the team. And it can't be that way." So I then did a series of meetings at the White House, in the Situation Room with the deputies committee. We met at the State Department. While I was meeting with the deputies committee and meeting with the Joint Chiefs, Richard Butler was meeting with Madeleine Albright to coordinate this inspection. This would be a test because Kofi Annan had gone to Baghdad and got a deal where the Iraqis agreed that instead of a big team, if the Iraqis declared to be sensitive, a small team of 4 people would go in. And so I was going to lead the inspection that was going to test these modalities. And it was also very controversial because Madeleine Albright didn't want me to do it. She said, he's too controversial. We need someone else. But everybody else said, no, he has to do it. He's the guy that did because he's the guy that they stopped. So there's a lot of interesting play there. But so we're meeting now. When I had gone to the National Security Council to the Situation Room, I had provided a list of targets that we wanted to inspect, and they slipped in the Ministry of Defense, they being the United States. And I said, we're not asking for the Ministry of Defense. And I said, plus Tarek Aziz has put us on notice that if we try to inspect the Ministry of Defense, it will be war. And they said, that's why we're going to inspect it. I show up there. So, we there was a room we were looking for, a safe we were looking for. So I could have an inspection that I needed to carry out. But the whole idea was that we, under the belief that Tarek Aziz would never agree, that they wouldn't agree, because they already said, you'll never be allowed in here. And so we're meeting we go to the Situation Room. It's the day before I'm supposed to leave. And it's Richard Butler, it's Charles Dulfer, Bill Richardson, Larry Sanchez, the CIA guy, the number 2 guy whose name I can't remember, the deputy ambassador at the time, and me. And Butler gets up there and draws out this timetable and says, "Okay, Scott, you're going to go in on this date. You have to have the crisis on this date so they can begin bombing here, because that gives them a 1-week window to bomb and achieve what they need to achieve because of Ramadan." And I went, I don't know about that, because I'm not here to trigger a war, and you shouldn't be here to trigger a war. That's their job. We should be talking about inspections, and are we going to get the political backing when I go in? What happens when I get stopped? When I call you, who do you call? What is the arrangement to go to the Security Council, get the Security Council to back us up? Kofi Annan has made this his deal. How do we bring in the Secretary General? These are the things we should be talking about. Instead, you're telling me that no, it's all about war, 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 war. When I showed up at the place, they of course blocked us off. Soldiers came out, guns drawn, and we had a crisis. And I remember, the senior Iraqis were coming, and Tarek Aziz was monitoring, and they were like, you can't come in here. And I said, look, I have to go in there. You guys do understand what's happening here. That if I leave, as I leave, cruise missiles come in. I mean, this. It's no secret. I said, so let's not do that. Let's find a way to make this happen. And we began a very long conversation, and it finally ended while they were waiting for Saddam to make a decision. I had dinner. They brought in food, and I got invited to the Iraqi table, where the Minister of Defense is there, and all the big generals and everybody there. And we're talking, and the head of the intelligence service looks at me and he goes, well, Mr. Scott, when was the last time you were in Israel? And I had told the Iraqis that I will never lie to them. I said, there might be times when I don't answer your question, but I will never lie to you. And I turned and I said, I actually was in Israel a couple weeks before, this thing, because we're planning, on Israel provides intelligence support like other nations do. And, I had to work with them, and they're looking at me, and then they start talking amongst each other. And Ahmed Rashid, who is the Minister of Oil, looks at me with a big smile on his face. He says, you're an honest man. And then they started talking. They made a phone call. He came back. He said, we're going to let you in because you're an honest man, because we believe you. When you say you're only going to do what is required to do by the Security Council resolution. And when I got in there, we got to the Ministry of Defense, and they had this map, but they had a curtain over it. And I said, I got to see what's behind the curtain. They said, you can't. That's like Dr. Strangelove. That's the war room. That's the big map. And I said, I got to see it. And they said, you can't. And I said, it sort of defeats the purpose. I mean, because let me tell you, if it comes out, I don't lie. So they're going to say, were there anything in there that they didn't let you see? And I'd say, yes, there was the big map. They said, well, that map probably was where all the weapons of mass destruction were hidden. And I said, you've got to let me see the map. And they talked, and they opened the map up. I looked at it. It was clearly the disposition of all their military units. I spent less than 30 seconds looking at that map, and I pulled the cover back and I said, I'm done. I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And they're like, that was the big map.
Yeah.
I said, yeah. And they're like, well, why didn't you look at it smart? Because I said, I'm not here to spy on you.
Right.
I'm not here to
Right.
do that. I'm here for my specific reason. Madeleine Albright was in Paris at the time. She was meeting with the French foreign ministry, and she was out at a function, and she told her counterpart, she said, "Hey, pretty soon I'm going to get a phone call, and the missiles are going to be flying. We're taking them out." And he goes, "What? What do you mean?" "Oh no, the fix is in." That was the exact words she used. "The fix is in. We've got an insider. He's going to create a crisis, and the missiles are going to fly." And then she got the phone call that said, "Nah, well, the fix wasn't quite in, and she didn't get the war she wanted." And she was so furious at me. I mean, she and Sandy Berger were cursing me out. I became the greatest enemy of America because I wouldn't play their little war game.
A hell of a story, Scott. I want to just fill in that Richard Butler was the Australian head of the inspection team. He'd taken over from
Yep.
Alpha Chaos, I believe. I know you didn't get along with him very well, and that's an extremely important story. He was acting like a good Australian, sorry to say, as a vassal of the United States right there.
But
And
he
most
was a
important,
vassal of the United
yeah,
States. Yeah.
but there is a certain little thing that governments are supposed to know. You are an international civil servant. Doesn't matter you're an American citizen. They had no business telling you what to do when you're working for the UN. In fact, that is against the charter. It's in the charter, isn't it?
Well, it
UN
was
charter.
when they brought me in September of 1991. Um, I went down to because just so you know, when I left the Marine Corps, I was heavily recruited by the CIA to go work in arms control intelligence staff because of my work in Vodkinsk, and CIA was very interested in me working there, and I wasn't interested in working for the CIA, but I was considered a trusted asset, and so I go to Washington D.C. and I told the United Nations, I said I have to go to Washington D.C. and have a meeting to get clarity. And they said, okay. I went down there and it was at the State Department, but it was a meeting that had the the State Department, the Joint Chiefs, the NSA, the CIA. They were all there, all the people doing this. And I said, I need to know right now, who do I work for? I said, because I'm an American and you know me. I'm a loyal American. I've been to war for my country. That was right after the Gulf War. I said, if you're yeah, I need to know if this is a wink, wink, nod, nod relationship, meaning I'm in there to do one thing, but I'm really there to do something else. I need you to be upfront with me because I have to make a decision now whether or not I want to do that. Because I'm an American. I mean, I understand there's games to be played and all that stuff, but I wanted to know. And I'm not saying I would have. I'm not saying I wouldn't have. I had made it, but I needed to know what the ground rules were. And they told me right then, you are there to work for the executive chairman of the United Nations Special Commission to implement Security Council Resolution 687. I said, stop. So my boss is Rolf Achaeus. Yes, I only take orders from him. Yes, I only take orders from him. Yes. And my mandate is the Security Council resolution. Yes. And this is the U.S. government's official position. Yes. I am not going to have someone come knocking at my hotel room next week saying, hey, Scott, you know, I'm from Langley and this is what we need to do. No, that will not happen. And I said, you guys understand that I'm a man of honor. And so this is the way it's going to be. And they said, no, we understand. Well, I think they regretted that stance because later on they actually were trying to get me to play wink, wink, nod, nod games, and I just wouldn't. I said, no, I worked for the executive chairman. Ralph Achaeus understood that. He believed me. He trusted me. Richard Butler was funny when he came in. I just implemented a program of covert signals operate. We were in there intercepting Saddam Hussein's presidential communications on the belief that they were directing security forces to hide things from the inspectors. Very sensitive operation. And Butler came in and we were briefing him in on this. And I wrote a paper to him trying to explain, because it had to be a big shock for him, thinking he's taken over a United Nations organization. He comes in and finds out that he's actually taking over an organization that's doing one of the biggest intelligence collection operations in the history of modern intelligence collection operations, all for the United Nations, because that's who I worked for. But I said, I work exclusively for you on the paper. You know, I work, and he wrote bullshit. He just, like, he didn't believe that. And I went to him and I said, I'm insulted by this. He goes, you're an American. I said, Yes, but I work for you, and I need you to understand that. I don't work for anybody else. I work for you and you alone. Whatever you tell me to do is what I do. You never have to worry about me going against your back, second get, and all that stuff. And I don't know if he ever understood that, but what it didn't matter is because he worked for them anyways. I mean, he was 100% a sellout to the United States. So
Disgraceful. Disgraceful. Before we move on to the current situation in Iran and want to draw on your military expertise for the next series of questions, were you still an inspector when the Lewinsky incident happened, Monica Lewinsky, and that he was about to be impeached and suddenly there's an airstrike against Iraq? Were
that
you gone
was
by
no.
then?
I had resigned in August of 1998, and I think the Lewinsky affair came right after that.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that's well, the first thing that happened is that we actually sent cruise missiles into Afghanistan and in Libya. Um, you remember the Al Shifa, um,
Was that
uh,
Sudan or Libya?
Sudan. You're right, Sudan.
Yeah,
Sudan.
the aspirin factory. They said was the
Aspirin
chemical
factory. Yes,
weapons.
yes, yes. Um, but then what came after that was Operation Desert Fox in December of 1998, and that was a deliberate setup. That was the interesting thing about that is in August of 1998, what led to my resignation was a inspection I was supposed to lead. It was actually supposed to take place earlier in early July, based upon British intelligence. The Americans and the Brits had decided that they couldn't let me do um, confrontational inspections because they weren't ready to back it up with use of force. And I said, well, then I have no reason to be here. And they said, no, 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 no. We're not saying you can't do your job. We're just saying that if you're going to do your job, it has to be based upon actionable intelligence of the highest quality. And the head of the MI6 office in New York, well, he liked me. He thought I was pretty aggressive, and so he said, Scott, we have something here. And I went over and I read it, and I went to Richard Butler and I said, we've got something here. Uh, Gyroscopes, high quality human intelligence, hidden in the Ba'ath Party headquarters in Adamiyah. Um, Send a team in, we'll surround the headquarters, and we'll have a crisis because the Iraqis won't let us in because we'll find it, but they have to let us in and they won't. So now we'll bring this issue to a head because the Iraqis are playing games. And Butler signed off on it. And so I built the team and we deployed to Iraq. And then the Iraqis tried to preempt us because they had a meeting that night and they said, we will no longer cooperate with Richard Butler. We view Richard Butler being a tool of America. We won't cooperate with him at all. So Richard Butler, Charles Dolfer, and I went back to the secure room and I said, look, send me right now, right the I have to go right now with my team, surround that building. You have to take charge of this process. You can't let them get away with this. Send me. We will surround it. They may gun us down, but at least we got made the point. They don't get to dictate this operation. And Butler loves it. Dulfer loves it. My team loves it. We all knew what we were signing up for. We were true believers. And he said, I have to make a phone call to Madeleine Albright. And he called Madeleine Albright. And then she says, I can't talk to you on this phone. You need to fly out to Bahrain. So then they put me on hold. So my team now is on hold. He flies to Bahrain and he has a conversation with Madeleine Albright. And next thing I know, the phone call comes in and I'm basically placed under arrest. Not criminal arrest, but basically Scott's not allowed to move, do anything, hold him in place, get him on the next airplane out, disperse his team. There will be no
You mean
inspection.
not under arrest from the Iraqis, but from the Americans,
From the
basically.
Americans, basically. Yeah, Sandy Berger said he can't speak to the press, he can't do anything, just get him out of there. And I came back and I was confronted by this, and I said, so I can't, and that's what led to my resignation. And I was supposed to testify for the Senate. My testimony for the Senate was supposed to be me, Madeleine Albright, and Cohen, the Secretary of Defense, because I wanted to. I wanted them there to explain to the United States Congress why they stopped an inspection that was based on good intelligence. But Albright and Cohen refused to appear with me, and so I testified by myself. But this intelligence that the British had, it was perishable. It literally, my inspection in August, it was supposed to go in July, but they delayed it. I went back to the MI6 guy. I said, this is going to be about 5 days past the use by date that you set. He goes, we think it's still there. It'll be right at the end of it, but we think it'll still be there in August. They won't have moved it yet. I said, all right. Didn't happen. Fast forward to December. The inspection team is sent to Iraq. They go to Adamiyah headquarters and they say, we want to get in there. And I said, wait a minute. Why are you going to Adamiyah headquarters? Because we have, and then the British released the intelligence, but they had, cleaned it up. And I said, this is the same intelligence, but it had a use by date, and the expiration date that was early August. It's now December. There's no way in God's earth that that's still good intelligence. So why are you sending the team in there? Because it was all about the provocation. And the irony is the Iraqis bent over backwards to let that team in. They're like, please, we'll let you in. Come on in. You can come in now. Bring in your team. Come in now. No, you have to let us let everybody in. The Iraqis said, no, the deal wasn't. But we're going to let you, it's not going to be 4 guys. We're going to let you have a team of 16 guys. You can come in with 16 guys. And even when I did the most aggressive inspections, I very rarely went in with more than 16 people. So this is like, please come in and do this. Nope, they pulled the plug, went out, and we started bombing them. And there. So, this is the kind of just outright fabrication that goes on. But the interesting thing is today, we're not even trying to do that with Iran. We're not even trying to play, at least back then we pretended that we were outraged about something. We pretended that they were cheating, even though we knew they weren't. Today, we're not even trying to set it up. We're just straight up saying, no, we're going to remove you. We're taking you off the map.
Exactly. It's the tyranny you talked about that was warned about by the earliest founders of the United States.
100%. Yeah.
That they worried about factionalism. They didn't want political parties, as you said, and they were worried that there would be a tyrant someday. And here's a guy, a president, who just yesterday said he's not going to agree with a Supreme Court decision. That's it.
So Congress is asleep at the wheel. Supreme Court is ignored. That means there are no checks and balances. The whole purpose of Federalist 51 was saying that we will control the tyrant through checks and balances.
Yep. They're gone.
There's no checks and balances.
They're gone.
So this country's over.
Yep. The Constitution, a roadmap of who has power, how it works, over. He's going to defy the Supreme Court. He's going to start this war whether he likes. I decide, he said. And he even said in this press conference about the Supreme Court decision that they're allowing me to destroy countries. I can destroy countries. He meant in terms economically, but in the context of what we're talking about now. And let's get back to what we're talking about now. Your military expertise is being called on right now. Explain to the audience what is the U.S. buildup of forces in the region right now, and what do you think the U.S. battle plan is?
All right. Well, first of all, let me explain something because it's very important for people to understand that while you're seeing this pretense of Trump is, I get to make the decision. Vance and Tulsi are saying no, but everybody else is saying yes. The reality is the decision's already been made. Just the way we deploy military forces when we do these mass mobilizations. To give you an example, in late September, early October 1990, I was pulled out of amphibious warfare school and put on what was called the ad hoc planning cell, working directly for the Commandant of the Marine Corps under the direction of Major General Matthew Caulfield, director of the Warfighting Center. This unit was to come up with amphibious warfare options for the Commandant to take to General Schwarzkopf because we being the Marine Corps, weren't happy with an Army general trying to tell us how to fight, the way we fight. He wanted 2 Marine divisions on the ground replicating Army divisions. We're like, nah, we do amphibious warfare. But the reason I bring this up is that around mid-October, as we're finalizing some of these plans, the question was asked, hey, is this an academic exercise? Meaning, I get to pull resources out, hypothetical, the best case scenario, or is this a real world war plan? Meaning that there are limits to what we can do. You know, we can only go with what really exists because other things are being committed, et cetera. And they said that about mid-October, the decision for war had already been made because of what's called the tip fiddle. The tip fiddle is the time phase tip time phase fiddle force deployment list. And if let's say we want to go to war on, D-Day, that means that we have to have our forces ready at the line of departure on D minus this. That means that we have to have force structure in place by D minus this, logistics, boom. We have to have all that there, which means it has to flow out of elsewhere. You can't have it all come in at one time. It has to flow in a manageable way so it can be built up. Forces can be built up. We have the sustainability built up. And around October 15th, the accumulation of forces that were pushing forward was such that we couldn't hit the off button. The war was on full automatic. And it's one of the things that was one of the criticisms of the Gulf War is that, while we're talking about Security Council resolutions, we didn't get a Security Council resolution until November. We didn't get a congressional resolution until January. But the decision was made in October, not for political reasons, but for logistical reasons.
Right.
And the same thing at the end of the Gulf War, people said we can't allow ourselves to be hijacked this way. We have to have flexibility. So they created a different approach, which was, I forget what they called it, alternative force flow or something like that. But the 2003 invasion was likewise, it turned out, we had to invade on the date that was set by the flow of logistics because we couldn't disrupt it. With the force, you can't delay. You build up and it's ready, and so we had to go to war. Today, based upon my experience, I believe we've reached that same point. To give you an example, we have forward deployed a lot of air defense. We started in early January up until now. We have at least 50% of our THAAD, the missile our more advanced missile interceptors. We have about 50% of them there. But in order to do that, we had to take air defense down from other areas of the world where we need it, like Asia. And Patriot batteries are brought down. So we have reduced our air defense capabilities in Asia and in Europe to build them up here. That means that we can't sustain that forever. There is a limited window where we can do this, but eventually they have to rotate back. And when they rotate back, to move one battery is 72 missions, C-17 missions. So we did that, and now we're flowing in air power. And it's not just airplanes. We're flowing in the fuel, the munitions, the support infrastructure, and more critically, the maintenance infrastructure. So we are relocating capability to the Middle East. And we have reached the point where we have committed so much there that the decision has been made. And so we will have to initiate a strike driven by the logistics of this war. And the Pentagon has told the president this. I mean, this is the thing. So all this talk about the president, I can make, the decision's already been made. And the interesting thing, though, is that the Pentagon would have been resistant of this if they didn't believe in success. And this is what should bother everybody, because there's a lot of people out there who are like, well, America's going to get their ass kicked. They're going to sink the Abraham Lincoln. I believe the Abraham Lincoln's at risk. They're going to do this, they're going to do that. Maybe, but they can't if they're almost knocked out from the start. The kind of forces we're bringing to bear here, this isn't going to be a limited strike. This is going to be a full-scale aerial assault designed to prevent the Iranians from doing that which gives them the greatest threat, launch missiles. We, if you look at the force structure, we're going in with Wild Weasels, which are F-16s designed to take out enemy air defense, not from a standoff, but close in. We're going to, based upon the force structure, we're going to take over the airspace of Iran where they launch missiles. And then we're going to spend a couple weeks killing everything. And we're going to prevent the Iranians from doing mass launches and things of that nature. Meanwhile, and we already see it. I mean, this is why we've got the students in the streets again. And we're starting this whole, the people want this. That's the new mantra. So we've already started playing that card. We have the force there, and we have to use it. We can't just keep it there waiting forever. We have to use this force for a variety of political reasons. And so I'm convinced that we're looking at a 7 to 12 week war, and it will be the most destructive thing that anybody's seen in a long time. It doesn't guarantee that we will win, but all these people that think that we can't do anything, you're about to find out where your taxpayer money goes, because the pilots that are getting ready to fly these missions are some of the best trained pilots in the world, flying some of the best aircraft in the world with the best capabilities in the world. And just so everybody understands where I'm coming from here, and I'm not saying this because I'm American and I want this. I don't want this war. I don't want this war at all. But if you remember before June, I said that the United States was in trouble because we lacked the ability to use conventional weapons to take out the Firdos underground enrichment plant. And I said my concern was that in order to take it out, we'd have to use a tactical nuclear weapon. Well, it turns out that DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, had spent the last year and a half or 2 years or 3 years with a team dedicated to evaluate the air shafts of the Firdos bunker and to find a point of vulnerability, and then to put one bomb in it and put another bomb right down on it. And the Air Force rehearsed that mission over and over and over and over again. And when it came time to execute it, they executed it flawlessly. I'm here to tell you right now that every mission that the Air Force is getting ready to be called upon to perform in Iran is a mission they have rehearsed over and over and over again. In Nevada, out there in the Nevada deserts, they've been running these rehearsals. They've been doing the low-level they've been practicing the tactics. This isn't going to be something where we're going to fly in and sort of be making it up as we go along. This is a well-oiled war machine that's getting ready to do something they've been training to do for years, and this is going to be devastating. I know the Iranians believe that they have the ability to defend themselves. No plan survives initial contact with the enemy. We don't know. We can't predict the future, but the notion that the United States is going to run into a chainsaw, be chewed up, and be humiliated, I'm not buying into that. I think the United States is going to inflict horrific damage on Iran. Whether Iran collapses, because this is the other thing that bothers me here, because the CIA is putting its 2 cents in. And look at Venezuela. I mean, and look at how the CIA infiltrated everything. The fact that the CIA is so confident right now leads me to believe that they have penetrated the Iranian regime in ways that we can't even imagine, and that the resilience we're expecting from Iran may not be there because of traitors from within, people who have already sold out, people who have already made decisions to turn off radar sectors and give away locations of this, that, and the other thing. The CIA is very cocky right now, very cocky, and that also bothers me, because normally the CIA would be saying, and they've done this in the past, we can't guarantee an outcome. No, we're not there. We can't guarantee an outcome. Right now, when you have the CIA saying, yeah, I think we can guarantee an outcome, just like they did in Venezuela. It just, everything adds up to disaster.
But wait a minute, you say they pulled assets, air defense assets away from Europe, and Putin's about to invade? How could they do
Yeah.
that?
Well, because Putin's not about to invade. Um,
Yeah. That just proves that right there, doesn't it? Yeah, he's not going to be in Paris by this Christmas, so we can put that aside for a moment. The Venezuela model. So you're on record, and I've had some turbulence about me early on saying that I thought Delcy Rodriguez and others would had sold out basically Venezuela to the United States, and everything that's happened since then is proving that. And there were only Ava Golinger and Tariq Ali in Britain were the only ones who know Venezuela better than just about any Western person that I know of. We're saying that from the very start that this was what was going to happen. So you're
yeah,
saying you think this is the regime change model in Iran. Will they have to do a decapitation strike anyway in the first few hours? Or can they, what are they going to do with the Ayatollah, the president, and the most important, the Revolutionary Guard Corps and that leadership? If they have lower level people who are ready to step in, what do they do with the people in charge right now?
kill them. Look, we tried to kill Khamenei early on. Um, the Iranian president, if you recall, had to crawl out of a bombed out building because we tried to kill him. He was injured crawling out the window of a building that had been struck. And you have to ask yourself, how did we know he was in that building? Because somebody betrayed him. Um, we actually killed a good many of the senior Republican Guard leadership. What we didn't do after that is suppress the security forces. But one of the things that's happened because of these demonstrations is that we have identified, for instance, if I have a student uprising in city X, we now know who makes the phone call to whom to mobilize what forces to come in and suppress. So we know the mechanism of suppression. And so what we're going to be doing is bombing these units so they can't make the move. We're going to be humiliating the government, even if they survive the humiliation of being targeted, being on the run. Um, and the whole idea is to collapse confidence in the Islamic Republic. And then the other question is, you know, what's the CIA has something up their sleeve. They just I can sense it. And there's something going on inside Iran, a fifth column that's very deep into the Republican or the Revolutionary Guard. The hints are there. The Israelis were able to get codes to shut down certain air defense sectors using cyber warfare. That you can't get those codes unless you're deep inside the regime. They were able to identify the where people were sleeping at night. There's a heavy duty compromise, and it comes from. I'm not blaming the Iranian president. I'm not saying that he is sold out, but it comes from greed. You see, part of the CIA's plan is when they sanction a nation, um, you punish the business elites. You punish them, and they're linked. And remember, in Iran, the business elites are the Revolutionary Guard. If you remember back when man, it's ancient history now, but it was right after the Iran-Iraq War. There was a very prominent Iranian leader who worked through the getting the Revolutionary Guard plugged into the reconstruction of Iran, and so they became head of construction companies and this, and they became a very important part of the business community. And these are people that expected to thrive. I mean, we can talk about the sanctity of the Islamic Revolution, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of people in the Revolutionary Guard who are just greedy. Greedy. They want to make money. And they're not making money right now. So what they're being told by the CIA is we get rid of these people, you'll be the guys we go to. You're going to make a lot of money in the new government, a lot of money. And there's enough people that bought, just like in Venezuela, they just bought out. And I will say this too. I mean, I know this is not what we're talking about. Just like in Russia, I believe that right now there is a fifth column being developed in Russia based upon Kirill Dmitriev's 7 points. And if you read those 7 points, these are the same tactics that we used in the 1990s to take over the Russian economy with the collapse of the Soviet Union. It's the same tactics that Joe Biden tried to foist on the Russians in March of 2011 when he went to Moscow and talked about, you know, we have American capital ready to come in and invest in you and make you all wealthy. But first, you have to make sure that Vladimir Putin never becomes president again. You got to do this, that, and the other thing. Um, and today, Dmitriev is selling these same 7 points, and I'm just saying, uh, Russia has to understand this means if that you've created vulnerabilities that will be that are premised on greed and will be exploited by the CIA because this is what they do. And I believe that's what they've done in Iran. And I just think one of the reasons why we're going forward so aggressively right now is because the CIA says we actually are in a position to do something this time.
They have it all in place. I just want to ask you about the first 24 to 48 hours when hostilities are initiated by the U.S. What does the U.S. have to achieve from their point of view? Take out the land to sea missiles, the air defenses. What can Iran do in those first 48 hours? And the U.S. has to try to prevent.
The big thing is to stop the Iranians from carrying out mass missile attacks. Um, Israel has said that they're ready to absorb 700 missiles, but not all at once. But they said, look, we can fight a war. We can take about 700 missiles, but in order to explain the damage being done, the end result must be the Islamic Republic is over. We can't absorb this damage and only find ourselves with the regime still in power, which is another reason why I I believe that people are telling Trump that this will actually work. And the Israelis wouldn't be going along with it if they didn't believe it would work, because this is a big risk for Israel. So our first priority is to keep the missiles from flying against Israel and our bases. We've put in sufficient missile defense to handle leakers, because the Iranians will get to fire one or two missiles at a time. But if the Iranians are able to mass fire, missiles and drones and overwhelm and saturate, first of all, they start putting us on the defensive. We have so much air power right now concentrated in one base in Jordan. And if the Iranians were able to put, 300 missiles on that air base, we'd be screwed. We'd be in a lot of trouble. So our first strikes are going to be to seize control of the Iranian airspace where they launch their ballistic missiles. And we're going to maintain constant, nonstop pressure there to prevent them from firing these missiles and to be destroying their capacity. Historically, when we do this, we tend to put special operations forces on the ground as well. We did that in the Gulf War. Israel did it in the 12-day war. And I would anticipate that we would see significant special operations forces operating on the ground, hunting down Iranian missiles. So, and this will be a big part of it. The other part of it is going to be taking out regime targets. Now, there may be a division of labor here where Israel, maybe goes into the, regime suppression mode, and we do ballistic missiles, or we can build kill boxes and give the Israelis a missile kill box. We get a couple, maybe some SAS guys will be on the ground and we'll support them. British Special Air Service, they were on the ground in the Gulf War doing the counter Scud stuff, and it's one of the missions that they take pride in. So I would imagine they'd want to play a part in this. They got a big base in the United Arab Emirates where they maintain their mobility squadrons. So I would imagine that we'll have tapped into them as well. But this will be the big thing, the counter missile aspect of this war early on. While to prevent the Iranians from able to deliver on their promise, they promised they're going to hit Israel. So we need to make sure they can't. They've promised they're going to hit the air bases in the region. We have to make sure they can't. They've promised that they'll strike energy production facilities. We have to make sure they can't. They will get one or two missiles out, but we have to prevent the sustained barrage that would give Iran, the military, viability. So this will be the biggest part of our war will be the counter missile war, the suppression of Iran's ability to fire missiles. And again, I just want to remind people we have a lot of aircraft that are in the region that are specifically designed to do this, and this is what they've been training to do. So, this isn't beyond the pale. This isn't unrealistic. This is very realistic in terms of carrying out this campaign.
So from the Iranian point of view, the success they could hope for is that they can get a lot of these missiles out quickly. They hit they hit Israel. They hit American bases like in Qatar, Jordan, the outside Erbil, the air base there in Iraq. And what about oil installations? And then the big question, we've been hearing about this for 30 years, that Iran could shut down the Strait of Hormuz. How would they shut down the Strait of Hormuz? And can they practically do that, given what you've just said about what the U.S. plan is in the first 48 hours?
If Iran allows us to strike them first, they're not going to be able to do anything. We will,
yeah.
We will
if Iran initiates hostilities, you're saying?
No, if Iran does what they've done in the past and is a responsible, law-abiding nation, believing in the rule of law and all this, and they let us bomb Iran first, if they let us get that first strike in,
right.
I don't believe our plan is designed to give Iran a break. I think it's designed to keep the pressure on Iran throughout the operation until the regime collapses. So I think if we strike first, no Iranian ship is going to sail, no missiles are going to be launched, no anything, because we're just going to come in and we're just going to, that the sky will be black with American aircraft. This is, again, I don't want to get in trouble, but Iran has a cognizable case for preemptive self-defense under Article 51. And if I were an Iranian general tonight, I would take out the totality of America's air power in the region. And I would start blasting Israel from here till time ends. And I would just keep missiles flying nonstop. I would turn Tel Aviv upside down. I'd disconnect all telephone calls with the United States. I would destroy everything and just keep doing it until, the United States sues for peace. It's the only chance they have of survival. If they let us initiate, it's the plan we want. But if we're here and they come in, they start taking chunks of our capability out, and then they create a political crisis by just blowing Israel off the face of the map. Israel will be begging for it because Netanyahu will go, wait, this is what we asked for. We're not here to do this. And, there's talk right now of Hezbollah being ready to, throw its weight back in, that they've reconstituted a lot of their missile capabilities, so Hezbollah could come in. The Houthi have said they're joining the fight as well. So suddenly if you got Iran preemptively striking, Hezbollah joining in, the Houthi joining in, we're off balance and we're not going to be able to recover from that. And that's the only chance Iran has. It's the only chance. If they let us initiate, I don't think it's going to, doesn't mean we're not going to lose people. I mean, the Americans better get ready. We're going to lose, a dozen or more aircraft. Pilots will be killed. Pilots will be captured. This is war. We're not talking about standoff attacks. We're talking about taking control of airspace, contesting it, owning it. We're going to be firing hundreds of cruise missiles, the Tomahawk cruise missiles. We're going to be firing other weapons that haven't been made public yet. Our defense industry has not been asleep at the wheel. And you're going to see new capabilities, coming forward too. And so the only chance Iran has is a preemptive strike. That's it. And if they don't, they're going to lose this war.
And as you said, they would have a good argument, a legal argument, not that the Americans or the Israelis or anybody else would care about the Article 51 self-defense. But wouldn't U.S. intelligence be able to detect that they're about to launch a preemptive strike? And then would there be time to the U.S. then to be prepared for it?
To carry out this attack, um, it's going to be a phased attack. Once we start it, it's going to be part of a plan of just attack, next wave, constant waves going in. And so that's going to take us time to get everything lined up already. So the question is, can the Iranians get inside our decision-making cycle, our OODA loop? Um, if they can act quicker than we can react, then they'll be able to do. The Iranians, with all due respect, they should be ready to launch today. I mean, my God, we've been broadcasting this attack forever. So in theory, the Iranians should be able, the Iranian president should be able to pick up the phone and say launch. And an hour later, they're launched. And we won't be able to do anything. We might be able to scramble some aircraft to get up, but we're going to be caught with our pants down. The problem is, I don't think the Iranians are ready to launch. I think what we're going to find when this is all said and done is that a big part of the ballistic missile command has been compromised and is not going to be doing what it needs to be doing, and is going to be creating vulnerabilities that can be exploited, because this is a very risky operation for the United States to be taking. In order to do this, you have to sort of hedge certain things in your favor. Um, I just I think the Iranians are screwed. I hope I can't say I hope I'm wrong. I can't say anything. This is so tragic because I'm an American, and I know this would be an illegal war of aggression. I know that, and the politicians who are planning this and implementing this should go to hell, and the general officers involved likewise, because they have a duty and responsibility to talk about constitutionality, and they're not. But I remember when I was preparing for Desert Storm, I was on the battle damage assessment cell, which means one of the jobs I did is I had to review target packages, to examine, what the target is, where the bomb's going to hit, what the desired damage, how would we determine that damage we met. So when we did the strike and I got the satellite photograph, I would look at the photograph and say, okay, we've met criteria 1, 2, 3, and certify it as such. And I remember going over the Ministry of Information, which was a legitimate target because it's command and control communication. We had to suppress Iraqi communications and all that. But I was planning that. And I knew that this wasn't a good war, but I also knew that we had a Security Council resolution and we had the Congress. So it was a legal war. I had no qualms about the professionalism of my job. But I do remember as a weapons inspector going to the Ministry of Information about 8 months after the war ended. And some of the employees were there, including one young journalist, female. And she was standing there and she was so afraid of me. She was shaking. I mean, literally, her hands were shaking. She couldn't talk and she was just crying. She was just so afraid that this American was there. And I'm like, my God, what have we done here? What have we done? And the reason why I bring this up is that right now there are young Americans, the modern day version of Scott Ritter, sitting there doing their job, preparing to do their job. It's a job that they're trained to do. And it's not their job to think about the politics. It's their job to execute the mission. And they don't understand the consequences of what they're getting ready to do. There's a 27-year-old journalist today in Tehran who thinks she's going to be dead at 27 because of some of the plans that some of these Americans are putting in place right now. And I don't want harm to come to her. I don't want harm to come to these Americans either. They're just doing their duty. When they took an oath, they didn't know that they were going to be called upon to do X, Y, and Z. This is what tears me apart because I can't cheer for my side to win because it's an illegal war of aggression. but I can't cheer for my side to lose either because that's dead Americans. I mean, this is the horrible position that we're in. I mean, this is why this war can't be fought because it's an unjust war. It's an illegal war. And believe it or not, the 20-year-old American that's there doing this stuff right now. Well, I'm 64 years old. You know, everything you do comes back to haunt you. Everything you do comes back to haunt you. And you will spend the rest of your life second guessing and thinking and wondering, was this just? Was this right? My God, what have I done? Sort of thing. And there will not be an American that comes out of this conflict in 30 years who will say, "Oh, we did the right thing." They will be haunted by this. And all these Americans that are cheering for this war right now, shame on you, shame on you, shame on you.
If Iran were to strike first in a preemptive strike, why can't they launch a decapitation strike against the prime minister's residence, against the Hakira, the so-called campus in Tel Aviv that houses the Ministry of Defense and the military intelligence director? I know a lot of it's underground. You will probably have visited that campus. Why can't Iran do that? Why can't
They
they do the
can't
decapitation?
because they're decent human beings and they don't think like this. That's the problem. They are actually decent human beings. You know, when the Iranians say, we don't want a nuclear weapon because it's immoral, they mean it. They're not playing politics, they mean it. And when they say, the ignorance, in America today, I've always talked about Russophobia and the big problem we have with Russophobia, but we have Islamophobia right now sweeping through America. Um, Laura Loomer and, all these other people out there just, declaring war against Islam and all this. And the language they use about Iran, the Shia faith is a faith of peace. I mean, I've been to Iran, and these aren't horrible human beings that are trying to, you know, take over the world. These are people who have family values, real honest to God family values, who want a better life, who are seeking peace. They are so respectful of non-Muslims, Christians, and Jews alike. They are very respectful of it. They, it's just sad how wrong we have gotten this country. It's done deliberately so. And the other thing is, it's done by people who call themselves Iranians. We have this diaspora here in America, and these people who wine and dine in Los Angeles are sitting there basically begging for their fellow countrymen to be slaughtered in the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions by the time this is done. I mean, you can't be an Iranian and be in support of that. And yet, the ignorant Americans are saying, no, these are Iranians here. They're the good Iranians. No, they're not. Many of them are Iranians who are the children of people who fled when the Shah fell. People who, supported the Savak and supported, what the United States was doing to Iran at that time, which wasn't good. If you ever want to have a good read, there's a book that was published by the Iranian students based upon the documents that they glued back together. Because back then our shredders were just single shred, single cut, and I think eighth of an inch. And they went through all the burn bags and got the stuff, and they pasted them all together, and they reconstructed the documents that show the role the CIA played in supporting the Savak's brutal oppression of the Iranian people. And so there's a reason why, the diaspora isn't in Iran today, because they support something that was evicted from Iran. But we just are so ignorant about Iran, about the Shia faith, about everything. If there was a way that I could, if I could issue, just even to just 20% of the American population, give them a round trip ticket to Iran, $5,000 spending money, and a passport, and say 2 weeks. Just take 2 weeks of your life and go to Iran, and then come back and tell me if you want to go to war. 2 weeks of your life. I've said the same thing about Russia. Just 2 weeks of your life. All you guys that think Vladimir Putin's the worst thing in the world, 2 weeks of your life. And I'm not talking about Moscow and St. Petersburg. Go to Ekaterinburg, go to Novosibirsk, go to Russia, Irkutsk, and see the Russian people, sit down with them, talk with them, and then come back in 2 weeks and say, yes, this is the most evil place on the planet. We need to take it off. You won't. You'll say the exact opposite, like, oh my God, why did we think the bad? We should be friends with these people. I want to go back. I'm here to tell you right now, Iran is that place. I went to Kashan, beautiful city. It's near where Natanz was, out in the area of the Natanz. And then above Kashan, there's a little village in the mountain. The name I can't remember, but they're well known for the embroidery of roses that they put in the scarves, women's scarves, and they make. And I was there during the Festival of Roses, actually. So I'm walking through Kashan as an American, and as you go through, every shop has something that where they have rose water or rose flavored cookies or something, and they're doing shashlik, and so as you walk, they're just grabbing you, come, eat, drink, have and then they found out I'm American. They're like, oh my God, an American. And this is right after Ahmadinejad was elected. So I'm thinking, American, death to America. They're going to string me up by the neck and drag me through the street. No, my God, thank you for coming. Thank you for coming to Iran. Thank you. Please, you're welcome. Come see the nicest people in the world, the nicest people in the world. And we're going to be killing them, Joe. We're going to be killing these people. They don't mean any harm to us. They aren't bringing any harm to us. They only want to be our friends. That's all they want to be, is the friends of America, of the American people. And yet we are passively sitting here doing nothing while this cult of personality is getting ready to unleash the most violent, the most a military force capable of inflicting more violence than any other military force before it, because our weapons are lethal. They're dangerous. The technology that exists today. I'm numb with grief, because this isn't going to end well for anybody. This is going to be one of the most tragic, because the American people have to understand, even if we win, we lose. This war is the end of the constitutional republic. It is literally the end of it. This is where the final nail was put in the coffin, because everything that made this constitutional republic viable failed. Every aspect of it failed, up to and including the people, because we don't even know what we believe in anymore. We certainly don't believe in the Constitution because we don't know the Constitution. I mean, I'm ready to take a test on this at any time. And I went beyond. I actually, I had studied the Federalist Papers when I was in college, but I've been reading them again because I said I need to get to the foundation of this. And there's another group of papers out there too, the Anti-Federalist Papers that were published, and these were the voices in opposition. A lot of people don't realize that most of the Federalist Papers were written to win New Yorkers over to but Massachusetts was saying, hell no, we're not doing this. And the Anti-Federalist Papers gave us the Bill of Rights. The original Constitution wasn't going to have Bill of Rights. There were people like Hamilton that said, we don't want that nothing can take away from the power of the executive. But because the Anti-Federalist Papers said, no, the people need to have rights and we have to give the people rights, that's where we got the Bill of Rights. But the struggles that we went through, the intellectual debates that took place back then, people need to familiarize themselves, because we keep talking about the genius of the founding fathers and giving us the Constitution. But the real genius was identifying the threats to American democracy, factionalism, tyranny. That's why we had a Constitution, to protect ourselves. And now we're just ignorant of it.
It's okay. We've got monuments all over Washington with their names on it. We're not a nation of men. We're a nation of laws. And yet, you can drive by the monuments. We're very much a nation of the men and not what they were saying, like what you just pointed out. I want to ask you about. I was going to ask you two questions that seem irrelevant now. Except for Jordan, it seems like every country saying you can't use our airspace, you can't use our airbase, and I think the U.S. just going to ignore that. Qatar is apparently have they agreeing to let that airspace be used? Only Jordan, isn't that right? It doesn't really matter, does it?
Doesn't matter. Qatar,
Yeah,
no, we don't care.
yeah, that's what I
What
thought.
are you going to do? For instance, England saying we can't use Diego Garcia.
Exactly. Starmer said that.
Well,
You can't use the RAF base in the UK as well, he said, Starmer.
well, we don't need RAF bases in UK, but Diego Garcia, I think you're going to see. I mean, if Starmer wants to play stupid games, you know, we'll just take it over. I mean, one morning, the British on there will wake up and there'll be an American military policeman saying, "Come with me, you're under arrest." But we've taken over Diego Garcia, national security contingencies. It now belongs to us, um, yeah, because we have a dictator. We don't have an American president. We have a dictator. We have a cult of personality. It's even worse than a dictator. Did you see what he's doing at the Department of Justice, putting the banner
Yes,
with his face? It's literally a cult of personality. I mean,
I
this is
I saw that in many Middle Eastern countries or Arab countries.
uh,
Assad, his father and son. Every time you turned around, there was a picture. I mean, they really strategically, they didn't overdo it, but you went you wouldn't go more than 5 minutes without seeing their face somewhere, and that's
yeah.
unbelievable to be doing that. Um, what about the question of interceptor missiles? And back a month ago, it looked like there was a go, and suddenly Israel was asking, "Don't do it." They were begging Trump, "Don't." This was the stories anyway in the paper, and the Israeli press wrote that they had not replenished their intercept missiles. The Wall Street Journal in June of last year, the 12-day war, wrote a piece, a very important piece, saying that Israel's running out of the interceptor missiles. The U.S. had used
Yeah.
a third of their own THAAD missiles helping Israel, and Israel begged war to stop. Now, it also said in that journal piece that had Iran made another barrage, they may have overwhelmed Israel at that time. Now, maybe Iran didn't know that, but they agreed to the ceasefire. Many people in Iran were arguing they should have continued, that they had Israel on the ropes, and they let them off the ropes now. So, have they replenished the intercept missiles, or what you're saying now, the overwhelming nature of how they're going to hit Iran, it doesn't really matter? Is that what you're saying?
The plan right now is not. What happened is Iran would send in these barrages, 40 missiles, 50 missiles, and you know you send in 40 or 50 missiles, you're going to burn through 120, 150 interceptors. That's just the way, 3 to 1. Um, and you run out real quick. Now, Israel is right. When they were talking about the strikes originally, they were talking about decapitation strikes, and there was going to be no effort or minimal effort put into suppressing ballistic missiles. The hope was that we would cause a collapse of the regime, which would then bring an end to the missile barrage. Um, but the Israelis, rightly at that time, said we can't allow that to happen. You can't create a situation where we're going to be hit with all of these missiles. We can't defend against it. And the American military commander said the same thing's true about the bases in the area. So what we've done is we've increased America's missile defense, layered defense approach. But the strategy now is not to let the Iranians fire a 40 missile barrage combined with 150 drones designed to saturate defense. The plan now is, we're going to be suppressing this. So when they fire, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. And now these missiles are going to come in, and you're not going to have an overloaded defense system. THAAD will be able to singularly focus, Aegis will focus, everything will focus on intercepting that one missile, and we're going to get it. That's the belief, is that we will get the leakers, but there won't be the barrage. And so I think that's the approach right now, is by preventing mass missile launches, the defense system will be able to protect, to a great extent.
Scott, thank you for staying with us. The geopolitical aspects of this, it's interesting that you haven't mentioned China or Russia in this conversation yet. What can
Well,
or will they do to help Iran?
there's not much they can do once the bullets start flying. Um, I mean, I think Russia's doing a lot, um, but we're going to find out how good our intelligence service is, to be honest, because there are capabilities being provided to Iran from both Russia and China designed to enhance air defense and radars, et cetera. But Trump is extraordinarily cocky. I mean, he's one of the greatest counterintelligence threats to America. I mean, because every time he opens his mouth, he says things he shouldn't say. But he talked about how we shut off the Russian and Chinese radars, and I can't tell you how, but we did. The reason why is I think that the United States intelligence services have been very successful at penetrating Russian and Chinese technical defense industries, and we're aware of these technologies, and we've developed um, capabilities designed to counter them. Um, we'll find out. I mean, like I said, it's all theoretical until it isn't. But I think Russia and China have leaned over forward as far as they can. Russia's in a particular problem here because Iran is a very important part of the Russian vision for BRICS. This is about north-south connectivity, the St. Petersburg, Bandar Abbas Railroad that connects to India. The Chinese have the new Silk Road. They've started to have rail connectivity from Western China into Tehran. Um, this is all important stuff for the multipolar world. If the United States is successful in taking out a BRICS nation, because Iran is a BRICS nation, it's a member of BRICS. Um, Brazil's next. Brazil's in the Western Hemisphere. The national security strategy says Brazil belongs to us. Brazil will be evicted from BRICS. We will get the Brazilians to leave BRICS. South Africa, the same thing. We will play stupid games there. And next thing you know, you have Russia, India, China, but India is already out. So you have Russia and China, and Russia is going to see its economic plans devastated because of what we've done. China is the only hope. I mean, again, this is just fanciful thinking, but just remind everybody that in order to build up our air defenses in in the Middle East, we had to take a THAAD unit away from Korea. We had to take THAAD unit out of Guam. We had to take Patriot units from Korea. Um, we have no air defense in the Pacific right now. And if we start bombing Iran, if I were the Chinese, I would invade Taiwan immediately, go full scale in. I just say what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Plus, there's nothing America can do. Our entire military has now been, all the air power we would need to fight a war in Taiwan is in the Middle East. We can't fight two wars at once. And then if I were the Chinese, I'd let Trump know that.
Hmm, that's interesting.
Because I'd just say, because that's the only way you're going to stop this
Yeah.
is to tell Trump, you go in there, we're going into Taiwan the next day, and good luck. But other than that, there's nothing they can do. They can't project military power into the region. Um, and so they're both in Russia's really bogged down in Ukraine right now. They've got, 900,000 men fighting that war. Their defense industry is almost singularly focused on, supporting that war. Politically, they're committed to that. There's not a lot of excess capacity for Russia to get involved in, confronting the United States and Iran. China's the only one that has, the military ability to do something, but it won't be in Iran. It would have to be Taiwan.
But China, their policy, I believe, is only to attack Taiwan if Taiwan declares independence. But you'd say they could use that as some kind of leverage against the U.S. And
Well,
would Trump the U.S. sacrifice Taiwan for Iran, for Israel? What the hell does Israel care about Taiwan?
Well, Israel doesn't, but again, when you take a look at once an illegitimate dictator begins to believe that he can do anything and get away with it, because he'll have had Venezuela, now he's going to have Iran, and again, the national security strategy. One of the big efforts they in there is containing China in the Pacific. And now with this confidence, we could turn around because you say that, the Chinese have said they will only take action if Taiwan is declared independent. Taiwan is de facto declared independence. I
Mm,
mean, they've made statements. They brought in American speakers of the House. The United States is sending weapons. We have troops deployed there. We've crossed every red line there is,
right, right.
except a formal declaration of independence. So China could make a de facto case that they've already crossed the line. But one thing is certain: if China does nothing, the United States, Trump, instead of trying to hold the Chinese back at the first island chain or the second island chain, the biggest stopper of containing China in the Pacific is Taiwan. And if we turn around and fortify Taiwan, if America gets directly involved in the defense, um, you know, that's a nightmare for China, especially the time when, the other thing the Chinese have to be, and this is again, we get back to strategic arms control. There is no New START treaty anymore. Um, Joe Biden, again, not too many people realize this. Joe Biden changed our nuclear war plan so that we could launch a preemptive nuclear strike against China's nuclear capability. Um, and we did that under the 1,550 cap. Right now, if we start uploading warheads onto the Minuteman III, uploading onto the Trident, um, we can even do better than that. We can take China off the map, and there's nothing they can do about it. And the Chinese understand that vulnerability. They're not ready to play this game. Um, and I'm not saying Trump will do that, but the American people need to know we have a madman in the White House. We literally have a madman in the White House who is rewriting nuclear war plans as we speak.
Well, that's a chilling thought. And he is mad. You mentioned the Iranians living in Los Angeles who went there after the Shah was overthrown, and they want itching to get back their economic interest, mostly their position in Iranian society that they had under the Shah. It's very much a parallel with the Cubans who were in Miami who left Cuba after Castro was overthrew Batista. They are itching to get back Cuba and where they were. It's exactly, and we got Rubio championing that. So before Brazil and all these others, I think Cuba might be next in the
Yeah.
revived agenda of William McKinley, which is what exactly Trump is. He has brought back this president, who he also reveres, like he does Andrew Jackson, who also defied the Supreme Court, to
Yep.
take territory back again in like Greenland, Canada, etc. This overt American colonialism, imperialism. So Cuba is maybe next. Now let's talk now about the aftermath of this war. Let's say it goes along the lines that you outlined, that the U.S. will ultimately be successful in this war, and that Israel will suffer maybe not as great damage, and the Straits of Hormuz won't be closed, and the American bases won't be hit, and Saudi oil installations in the east part of Saudi Arabia where the Shia live, that won't be struck. And what is the aftermath here politically for a victory, first in Iran? Is there a possibility of civil war breaking out, as there was in Iraq after the U.S. invasion of Iraq?
Yeah, I don't see Iran, a post-conflict Iran, um, creating a unified opposition-led government. Um, because some of the forces that we're talking about unleashing, if you take a look at, what's going on, the Baluch Liberation Army, they're not going to say, well, we wanted independence from these Islamic Republic, but we'll give in to the new Shah. No, they want separation. Kurds, they
Kurds
want
in the
the
north.
Kurds. There's the Lor population that is in the Kurdistan area. They want the Azeris. They want the Arabs, the Avaz Arabs, they want. So I think you're going to see Iran break up, fracture, and there will be tremendous unrest that goes on for it. But we don't care. We don't care. We'll literally let them kill each other and fight it out, and we'll pick one or two sides, and the CIA will support them. But you know, because it's to our benefit. What we want. I mean, look at the. It's just Trump being stupid. In Venezuela, you remember Trump's big thing. Because again, the Chinese sort of set themselves up. They built a $9 billion refinery that was exclusively tied to Venezuelan oil. The way Venezuelan oil, the chemical composition. There's a unique, just not fracking. I forget what they call it, but how you break down the oil, the refining process. Yeah, and so now the story is that China's buying Venezuelan oil from the United States because they need the oil. China needs Iranian oil. So, what the United States is going to try and do is control the flow of energy into China. And this is our indirect approach of being able to squeeze the Chinese out. It's this kind of game they'll be playing. If we win this war the way Trump thinks he could win this war, and the way he may win this war, it's just going to empower this American empire. Everybody thought America was in the decline and all that. Well, that's because the rules-based international order no longer functioned the way it was supposed to. But Trump has done what nobody thought would be possible, which is show a total callous disregard for everything. For everything. No rules apply, nothing apply. There are no restraints, no constraints. He doesn't care about anything. And if he wins this war the way he thinks he's going to win this war, I just think you're going to see an even more aggressive America and the world out there, because the world is full of good guys. Even the bad guys are good guys, meaning they're like, well, wait a minute, aren't there rules? Aren't there laws? And when you're dealing with a country like the United States that has decided there are no rules, there are no laws, we will always have the advantage over the other people who are trying to do the right thing, trying to have a meeting, trying to have a negotiation. We're not. We're again. I mean, we're getting to the point where the United States is becoming a cancer on humanity, and how the world chooses to deal with the United States is going to be. Because the loss of New START, people need to understand we're getting ready to go into a major buildup of strategic nuclear power. That we're talking about resuming nuclear weapons testing. We claim the Chinese cheated. We don't have any evidence they cheated. We just make it up. And so now we're going to start testing again. Why? Because there are no rules. There's no moral compass. There's nothing, just pure power, pure unadulterated power. And it's not controlled by the Constitution or the premise of the Constitution or the fiction of the Constitution. The Constitution no longer exists. You just had a president of the United States, as you rightfully pointed out, tell the Supreme Court, I don't care about you. That's what Andrew Jackson did to the Supreme Court too. I don't care. How many divisions does the Supreme Court have? None. And normally Congress should be rallying around and say, no, you can't do this. This is an impeachable offense. No, and now we got midterm elections coming up. If Trump wins in Iran, this could empower him to declare martial law in the United States. And he's already gone through the dress rehearsal. 3,000 DHS agents occupying Minneapolis. We have troops in the streets of Chicago. I just came from Washington, D.C. You have National Guard everywhere. It's a city under occupation. And he could do this in other cities as well. And again, with Congress pacified, neutered, the Supreme Court silent, made irrelevant, the people are just sheep, straight up sheep. he could get away with it, and for him not to get away with it, I mean, here's the thing. People need to understand that when we dive into factionalism and tyranny, and we move away from being a nation governed by the rule of law or the concepts of law, the only option is violence. The only option is violence. And either violence will be imposed on you by the tyrant, or you will impose violence on the tyrant. And this is the United States we're talking about. I mean, this is unthinkable. And yet that's the direction we're going. So a Trump victory in Iran could be devastating for not just Iran and the region, but for America, because we are empowering a cult of personality.
So well, you say that he made his decision already, and I was thinking, like a lot of people, that he hasn't decided yet, and he has one ear. He's got people telling him this is going to be a disaster. For the pump, the gas, the price of gas will go up to $10 or more. And this can lose your popularity. You will destroy your legacy. You will be a failed president. And then the other ear, you got Netanyahu saying you will be a great president, one of the greatest of all time. You'll be a hero. You can march through that arch that you're building on the Memorial Bridge towards Lincoln Memorial. You will be like a conquering Roman emperor. So he has to decide, which one am I going to do? But you're saying he has already made this decision, or it was made for him, Scott?
Both. He knows what he wants to do. And a process has been initiated that has taken on a life of its own. We really can't stop this military buildup. We're at a point, and again, people, if you don't believe me, there's been papers written on this. You go to the first Gulf War, the military acknowledges that the tip fiddle took over decision making, meaning we were held hostage by it. We had to, the decisions were taken out of our hand by the process of military buildup. The same thing in 2003. The timing of the conflict was driven by the military buildup. And I'm here to tell you right now, the same past patterns tend to repeat themselves, and the same pattern is repeating itself, where the military buildup has taken on a momentum of its own that imposes realities that are driven by logistics and other issues, and it's taken the decision out of the president's hand, because you can't stop this. It's going to happen.
So the question is when then? Some people are saying that the State of the Union address coming up in 2 days on Tuesday is a marker. Either he does it before, uh, and then he goes there where the war started, or he does it after. And I think he won't want to go there. He doesn't want to have to explain what he's doing. He's avoiding the kind of speeches that at least the two Bushes gave to try, and a lot of it was bullshit, as we know, but they tried to sell a war to the American people. There's no effort being made to sell this war. And that is one of the most chilling things about this whole thing. That it seems to be just a done deal without any input from the U.S., let alone the Congress. So now we hear from John Kiriakou. He says he has a source, a friend who went to the White House, and there's a decision made. It will happen Monday or Tuesday. So Trump, being the showman that he is, and not wanting to explain himself beforehand, but not going there after maybe things have gone badly for 2 days, could he not make that announcement right there in the Congress, getting a standing ovation? Hopefully not the way Netanyahu got standing ovations in that very chamber, the House of Representatives. Do you think when you think this is going to happen?
I always get in trouble on these ones because it's
Right.
you don't know. But I do think that the scenario you just laid out, I think that this could happen Sunday night. So the Americans wake up Monday morning with the war happening. The Pentagon will be broadcasting beautiful video of American bombers blowing the crap out of everything. We'll have the compliant media talking about. I mean, do you remember when I forget, was it Matt Lauer that was watching cruise missiles being fired from a destroyer, and he was like the
Beautiful.
beauty.
It
This is
wasn't Lauer.
beautiful. The
It
beauty.
was I mean, NBC guy. I'll think of his name in a second.
But
Yeah, it
you remember
wasn't
what you know
Lauer.
what I'm
Yeah.
talking about.
Yes, of
It's just
course. The beautiful sight of those Patriot missiles.
Yeah. It's like, what? There's nothing
Williamson.
beautiful about
Williamson,
that.
is that his name? Yeah. Mhm.
Brian Williams.
Brian Williams.
Brian Williams. Yes.
How we
So,
forget their names. But anyway,
well, we're
they're
going to
no
have a
longer
whole
on the
host
air, right? They're gone.
of,
But
of new people out there talking about the glory of America, the might. I mean, Pete Hegseth will be lionized, the Secretary of War, da 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 da. And then Trump will come waltzing into Congress and he is going to be the conquering hero. And he might even put a cape and a crown. He might Napoleon the whole thing and put a crown on his freaking head and say, I am the king. I am the emperor. This is mine. I have done this. I am the greatest. And then walk out without saying anything other than nothing America stood for matters again. I think that's a very, very viable scenario because we have the military power in place. And again, there's a couple things that mitigate against it, moon phase and all this kind of stuff. But in modern war, it just doesn't matter. When you're taking control of an airspace, you're taking control. Whether it doesn't matter where the moon is, but intelligence, everything is coordinated, and nothing happens in isolation. So as we move this force in, the Iranians are responding. We're collecting. We're adjusting target decks, etc. And there comes a moment where it's there. It's like the chef's kiss. We're ready. We got it. And if you wait, things start to get out of sync. And so I believe that it looks like everything has been syncing up. Intelligence collect. Again, some of the tells are the demonstrators on the ground. You don't want to pull that trigger prematurely. They've got the demonstrators out there now. I think they're hoping to get, the potential for violent escalation that will then require security forces to come, but they're going to be timed, so they're bombed, and so now these demonstrators take over. Take over and run wild in the streets, and you have chaos. People lose confidence in the government. Bombs are falling. Maybe paramilitaries come out with their white pickup trucks and they go running around with their AK-47s, executing regime people, in bloodbath in the streets and all this stuff. And we declare victory, and aren't we great? The pieces are moving. You wouldn't want to, if I were the CIA, I wouldn't want those demonstrators in the street if I wasn't going to be bombing for another 2 weeks. Okay,
yeah.
and those people are in the streets because we told them to be in the streets. They're not in the streets because they are good, God-fearing Iranians. They went in the streets because we told the cell leaders, go now, move now,
Yeah.
begin to do this. And the fact that we've initiated that movement tells me that John Kiriakou might be right. And yeah.
Did they think that they were going to be able to overthrow the regime with that last uprising and this repression against, the Turks alerted Iran that the Kurdish forces were moving from the north. Apparently they were defeated.
Yeah.
So it was a hell of a lot of things going on. I don't know about the Baluchis in the south.
The Baluch are making some movements too.
They were.
Yeah, they start blowing up buses and blowing
Uh-huh.
up jeeps and killing people. I think that was supposed to be the Trump originally had a 3 to 5 day war planned, a quick one, a quickie.
Right.
And
Right.
and I think what happened is the pieces started moving, and Trump was ready to go, and the Israelis went, nope, it isn't going to happen. We don't have confidence that the regime's going to fall on this one. We don't see the pieces in place. You're too late with the bombing campaign. The security forces have already suppressed and done this, and all you'll do is unify the Iranian people, and the missiles will hit us and all this stuff. So it got out of sync. That's the danger. The plan got out of sync, and so that's why they pulled the plug on it.
Yeah.
This time, I think they've reset it. We're dealing with evil people in Washington, D.C., but they're not stupid people. In terms of the CIA are very good at this sort of thing, very good at being very evil, of destroying societies, and they, I think are in sync. The British are at play. The Mossad is definitely at play. There's a bigger plan going in, and I think all the pieces are coming in together. And Trump has to pull the trigger. And I think Trump wants to pull the trigger. I think Trump actually sees, and it's one thing we haven't talked about is Epstein and the role
Oh yeah,
that
just
plays
about
on,
to raise that. Hmm.
because it's real. And it's real on a number of ways. It's real in terms of, the potential of Israel, using that level of corruption to control people and control mechanisms. But it's also real in terms of Trump is in. If here's the danger of the Constitution, if we allowed the constitutional process to work out, Trump would probably be impeached and could possibly be convicted in the second half of his term because um, people are very unhappy about him, about what he's doing with DHS, with ICE, and now this whole Epstein thing. It's just bad. It's really, really bad. Um, you just can't. Where there's smoke, there's fire. I do believe that you're innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. But I also, when you look at Donald Trump's behavior, his record, and you look at the allegations that are there, just overwhelming allegation after allegation after again, it's not far-fetched to sit there and say he could have done that. I mean, this is a man who ran Miss Teen Universe pageants and bragged about being able to go into the dressing rooms of teenage girls because he owned them. And I'm like, well, that should have gotten you arrested right off the bat, but it didn't. Um, and now you have the horrific allegations of him raping and threatening to kill. Um, this is a political crisis for Donald Trump. Um, and this war solves that problem because you know what no one's going to be talking about for a long time because nothing. The Epstein files have been out there and they're there, but the American public, we're not a serious group of people. We are like cats with laser beams, and we're sitting there going, "Oh, Epstein, 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 Epstein. Iran bombs, bombs. Oh, look, beautiful bombs, missiles, boom, boom. USA, US. We will have people in the streets of Washington D.C. shouting USA, USA, USA as we bomb Iran, and they'll just be celebrating this orgy of violence. And if Trump wins, I mean, there's not going to be any momentum. There's not going to be anything to latch on. People are just say, forget about Epstein. We've got the man who did what nobody could do in 47 years. He brought down this, that, and the other thing. And the other thing is, I think you're going to start to see abuses of power again. I think you're going to start to see the FBI make raids. I may not be here very long. I'm not happy about that, but I don't know how much longer Trump can allow me to continue to speak like this. And who knows what else is going to happen. But I just, when the Constitution no longer matters, none of us matter. And we can't talk about freedom of speech when there is no freedom of speech. And who's going to rise up to defend us? What, are we going to take a case to the Supreme Court? Well, he already told them to pound sand, so it doesn't matter. I could get the Supreme Court to say Scott Ritter has a right to say whatever he wants to say when he wants to say it. And Trump will say, well, that's all right, but I've put him in jail for 15 years nonetheless, because I've determined that he is a threat against America.
Well, Epstein, we had on our another show on our regular program, Ari Ben Menashe, who was a pretty senior officer at the Military Intelligence Directorate. He said, as he has said before, that he knows that Jeffrey Epstein, who he met in the office of Robert Maxwell, went to work for Ehud Barak, who was the head of the MID at that time. And he has never worked for Mossad, but he worked through the MID. And he got paid more or less through this guy, Wexner, who just spent 5 hours being interrogated by only Democrats on the House who flew out to Ohio. And not one of them asked anything about his possible intelligence links, where Wexner started this group, MEGA, with the Bronfman family in Canada, the Secret Seven, arch Zionists both, and who are alleged to have ties to intelligence. There were no questions about that. So this whole aspect of Epstein's intelligence operations, which in the last week we've got more evidence. Now it's turned out that an apartment building on East 65th Street in Manhattan that was run by Epstein's brother, owned by Epstein's brother, but run by Jeffrey Epstein, was wired for surveillance by people from out of the Israeli consulate slash UN mission on 42nd Street and Second Avenue. So the Israelis wired that thing. Did they wire his townhouse? Did they wire the island? Did they wire um, his place out in Arizona? Did somebody wire his Paris flat? Maybe the French did. He is, without doubt in my mind, all the deals he did for Israeli businesses across Africa and Latin America and, sorry, in Asia. Yeah, this guy, and he was not dealing with lower level diplomats and missions around the world. He's dealing with the most powerful people, from the
Yeah.
Prince Andrew, former Prince Andrew, to Bill Clinton, etc., etc. I'm beginning to conclude that Jeffrey Epstein was one of the most important, if not the most important operative that Israel had in the world. What do you think?
I think he was part of a system used by Israel and, gosh, I don't want to be coming off as anti-Semitic, but the pro-Israeli crowd here in the United States. I don't know if I've told you this before, but there was a time when I was being actively recruited by the Republicans and by AIPAC and by everybody to join their team. I was the greatest thing in the world, apparently, and I had gone down to Washington D.C. For a series of meetings with senators and congressmen, and I went to this one senator's office, a God-fearing Christian, and his entire office was staffed with college-age girls of particular beauty, blonde hair, blue eyes, buxom, wearing very short skirts and their blouses exposing their assets. And I went back to my hotel room and I got a phone call, and it was one of the girls who had given me her business card. And she said, we have this party that we're holding, and we'd like you to come to this party. We think it would be a lot of fun. And I was like, well, I don't know. I'm sort of in for the night. But I then got a phone call from somebody in the system. He said, did you get a phone call from Senator so-and-so's office? I said, yeah, I did. He said, were you invited to a party? I said, yes, I was. He said, Scott, pack your bags and leave right now. Leave Washington, D.C. right now. I said, well, I'm not going. He said, doesn't matter. They're coming to you. If you don't go, the party's coming to you. And either way, tonight's the night. They're going to get you. So go home. And I did. I packed my bags and I went, and I got one of the last shuttles out of D.C. to New York, and I went home. It's part of their whole sexual entrapment. This is what they do. This is their whole everything they do, and it's all run by the Israelis. I mean, I could name the people that were involved. I when I would go to NBC or CBS or ABC to do these interviews, I'll interview Peter Jennings, or I'll interview Tom Brokaw or Dan Rather, and then on the way out, the producer comes up and doesn't hand me the CBS or ABC or NBC production card. They hand me their APAC card. Hey, Scott, I'm with. I'm here. We do some other work here. We'd like you to come and do this, that, and the other thing. APAC is everywhere, controls everything. There's nothing they don't control. They control all the messaging. They control the messaging everywhere. And if you're not going to be willingly on their side, then they're going to corrupt you. And Washington, D.C. is one big den of corruption. You can't live and work in Washington, D.C. without being corrupted by AIPAC, by the Epsteins of the world. So I think Epstein is part of a system. And I don't think he operates alone. I think there's other, you know, circles of corruption, but they all work for the same people, the Israeli intelligence service. And when you speak of, the Aman, the military intelligence, remember, they're the ones that ran Jonathan Pollard. It wasn't Mossad that ran Pollard. It was Aman that ran Pollard. And Aman is heavily involved in these corruption cycles. Just remember who the Israelis are. These are the people that round up Palestinian women and rape them on videotape, and then send them back to Gaza and say, you have to work with us or else we'll release this tape. This is who we're talking about. These are the scum of the earth. These are the most evil people on the planet. And this is how they operate. They don't believe in human emotion if it's not Jewish. If you're not Jewish, if you're not part of the team, their team, you're just an asset to be used, abused, and thrown away. They don't care about you. They will corrupt you. They don't care about your moral compass. They don't care about anything. They're just going to use you to achieve the results that they want. And if you don't play their game, then they spend a lot of time trying to destroy you. And I can say that I understand that, but it is what it is. But no, I think the Epstein issue is bigger than just Epstein. I think it's a much broader scale system of corruption. You're muted.
Sorry, but he was a hugely important player in that system.
Hugely important.
That's what I'm
Well, he
trying to say.
corrupted the money. I mean, he corrupted, you know, it's not so much, I mean, he apparently corrupted everybody, but he corrupted the money. I mean, the people, the banking industry, the people that is the money behind a lot of these projects. He corrupted them. There's people that should never be allowed to walk free again, who bought their freedom. They've paid money. They've been allowed to buy off, victims. It's the whole system's corrupt. I mean, again, I've been focusing on the corruption of the constitutionality of America, but what Epstein has shown is that we have no moral compass in America. I mean, the people that should be the leaders who are talking about doing the right thing, they've all been corrupted, and so they only do the one thing, which is what's good for Israel. Look at Mike Huckabee. Did you see that interview with Tucker Carlson? I mean, Mike Huckabee is disgusting. It's the same thing with Ted Cruz. I mean, these people have all but said they are loyal to biblical Israel. That's their only loyalty. That's it. Nothing else matters. And I'm like, well, then turn in your passport, stop calling yourself an American, and go live in the Holy Land. But he's the American ambassador, and he doesn't represent America at all. He represents Israel and only Israel. Ted Cruz is an American senator, and he represents Israel and only Israel. You don't need to corrupt Huckabee and Cruz because they're playing the game. They're already corrupted. But that's the ideal. Unless you're willing to embrace Israel to that extent, to where being an American no longer factors in. If you can't do that, then they have to corrupt you to get you to play that game. But no, Israel's the greatest threat to the United States of America. Israel's the greatest threat to the world. Israel's the greatest threat to humanity, because the things that were done by Jeffrey Epstein, the crimes committed against children, this is the kind of stuff that destroys the human race. I mean, because if we allow that to happen, then we stand for nothing. We defend nothing. What is the family unit? If children are no longer protected, what is the family unit? What is this all for? What is this all about? And don't tell me greater Israel, because I mean, I know that's the answer, but no, I'm sorry.
No,
but you can't even have this conversation without being called anti-Semitic,
Yeah, well, the Greater Israel Project, if you read Ben Gurion's memoirs, it's all written in there what the plan was. And it's been gradually playing out over 80 years. We've had incredible statements of admissions that this is what's going on from people like Moshe Dayan, saying, "Don't be surprised if the people in Gaza come and get us someday because we've stolen their land." He says they said these things openly. They didn't
Yeah.
pretend that they were taking over a country and expelling and killing lots of people, 700,000 in the end. And the project is on steroids now, but we've seen it in Gaza and now on the West Bank. And somebody pointed out to me the other day that jurisdictions like Queensland and Australia is another one going to outlaw the phrase from the river to the sea. So you can't say that, but Israel is militarily doing that. They've had an operation in Gaza to move towards the sea to drive the people out, and they're moving on the West Bank towards the river. So while they're actually forget about the Likud founding document and their manifesto that's in there, they're doing it militarily, operationally, where we can't say it, but they are doing it, and U.S. and Australia and Britain and Germany and others are supporting them.
An American ambassador just literally legitimized Israel taking over the Levant, Iraq, Saudi Arabia. I mean, where is the Saudi Arabian, where is Mohammed bin Salman right now?
Oh,
Why isn't he calling up the phone to the president saying, I demand the resignation of Mike Huckabee? Um, Saudi Arabia is not part of Greater Israel. Where, I mean, it just shows you how the Arabs have sold out,
oh. Well,
which
I
is
think they're
another
a little
reason
worried
why.
about the Israelis now. The Israeli advances on the region, the, but they're not. They never cared much about the Palestinian people. But now their own skins may be in line, so maybe they're afraid. Obviously, bin Salman is afraid.
The only ones that are defending them is Iran, and we're getting ready to take them out.
Yes, yeah, which was the head of the snake at one point for the Saudis, but now is like they need them. That's right, to protect themselves from Israel. So what would happen to the Abraham Accord countries? What happens to the Gulf monarchies if Iran is taken out?
Oh, it's over. I mean, they've already. What'll happen if Iran is taken out? The Abrams Accords will be on steroids, and
Yeah,
Israel will take over the entire region. The entire region will become subservient to Greater Israel, um,
yeah.
economically,
The,
politically. Yeah.
the regional empire with the umbrella of America's global empire. This is what
Yep.
we're seeing unfolding right now. You talked about Cruz and Huckabee, but we have to say something about Senator Lindsey Graham. He's not a Bible thumper, from what I'm saying, but he has recently said he was asked about the killing of civilians, also in Gaza, as Huckabee said it was hardly touched anyone. And Lindsey Graham said, "Do we care about the German civilians or the Japanese? When we kill them, we don't care about those people." And he expects Americans to die in this war, and they're basically saying they should. What is this guy's problem, Scott?
Forget there was a movie where someone says, "What's his problem? What's wrong with this guy?" And the answer was a lot. uh, I mean, Lindsey Graham is. I think he is. He and John McCain
Mm,
were the personification of the destruction of the American moral compass. They came, they're just their ability to embrace war as a solution, their unwillingness to see the humanity in the victims of the wars that they were imposing, because they basically believe in one thing and one thing only, and that's American power. Um, I mean, Graham, he's supposed to be this lawyer, this guy who, he talks about how he was a lawyer and, he was in the Air Force, he was a colonel, he knows the law, he knows the Constitution. But the things he says are not grounded in law, and there's no moral component. He's truly a man who operates. If we could erase his name, the dates, his nationality, and just publish his words generically, they would comfortably fit in documents derived from Nazi Germany and the ideology of hatred that the Nazis had towards Jews, towards Gypsies, towards Slavs. I mean, because some of these languages they use, um, you know, the operation that the Germans had in place to depopulate, Belarus, for instance, to create a German vacation land, the necessity to slaughter tens of millions of people. Um, Lindsey Graham sounds like a man who could easily buy into that plan if it facilitated Greater Israel. And here's the ultimate irony. Greater Israel is looking more and more like Nazi Germany. It's the same level of racial supremacy, racism, degradation of human beings, etc. And people need to start being honest. I know the second you say this, say, "Oh, you're anti-Semitic." It's time that we say there's a reason why Congress and everybody else is trying to make it, make anti-Semitism illegal and have such a broad definition of it, because they don't want people to be making these apt comparisons because they are apt. It's not anti-Semitic. First of all, the Arabs are Semitics, Semites. So how can I be anti-Semitic if I'm actually, articulating in support of, the Arab people? But Lindsey Graham is a hate-filled warmonger, just like John McCain was, and their ability to push for military conflict without regard of cost is stunning. And again, it just very much parallels the thinking of people who wore a different uniform and spoke a different language and operated at a different time frame. And let's maybe call them Nazis.
Mm.
Greater Israel is Greater Germany. It's just in a different part of the world, a different flag, but same tactics, same lack of moral compass.
Well, Graham is an imperial senator like Cato the Elder, who apparently ended every speech, and the Roman Senate would destroy Carthage. So he wants the expansion of American power. He was in Maidan with McCain, if you recall, riling the people up to overthrow the government. Of course, the U.S. had nothing to do with that overthrow. That is a whole nother program. I'm just going to end with asking you about. I started saying that Ari Ben Menashe told us that he believed, of course, that Israel has the unredacted Epstein files and they have all the videos, if he was getting the surveillance videos for them, that they could use that. And Netanyahu, if he goes to the White House, could use that as a way to force Trump to go to war against Iran if he was wavering. What do you think of that?
I think, you know, look, us put it this way: in the intelligence business, when they case officers are deciding when to, or even the FBI, when the FBI is, trying to turn people, and there's that moment where you have to make the recruiting pitch. If you come in too strong, uh, people will grow a backbone.
Hmm.
God forbid if an Israeli prime minister ever went into the White House and tried to blackmail an American president in the Oval Office. If I were president, he would never walk out of the Oval Office. I'd kill him on the spot. I'd have him killed on the spot. I'd have him drawn and quartered in the front, and I'd send that as a symbol to the world. You don't come into my house, the White House, and threaten me. But you don't need to. That's just a crude way of doing it. Netanyahu never has to mention anything. You have other people who mention it in whispers and in suggestions, and it comes to the president indirectly. So that when Netanyahu shows up, nothing has to be said because everything's understood. That's how you control. And so, no, Netanyahu will never go to the White House and say, "Hey, Donnie, baby, look what I got here. You've got to do what I want." No, he'll come in and say, "Mr. President, thank you for receiving me. I'm here to talk about issues that are of great concern to Israel, da, da, da. Of course, we understand the necessity to move forward." And Trump will be sitting there going, "Yep," because he's already sold his soul. I mean, remember, how hard is it to corrupt a man who took $100 million from Miriam Adelson? He's
Right.
already been corrupted. He's already owned. His son-in-law owns him.
What
Um,
is
and it's not just the sexual deviancy of Trump. It's the criminality of his businesses.
Mm.
Um, and that's another reason, again, why Epstein controls all these bankers. When they find out how money's really being run, what's really being done, that actually could bring Trump down quicker than, whether or not he raped, a 6 or 8 year old girl that can't be proven. But you can prove the economic crimes. And the Israelis have that as well.
Yeah.
Remember, it's not just about controlling them through, bad photographs and bad videos. You control them through money. Money controls everything. And the way Epstein corrupted the entire financial industry of the United States is stunning, because that's where the real power is. That's where things happen. That's where decisions are made, money's moved, things happen, and all that. Um, I'm just saddened by all this. I mean, I grew up believing in this country. I believed in the shining city on the hill. I believed in that the American people were a force of good, that the Constitution uh, allowed us to have a level of moral standing that enabled us to stand taller amongst the people of the world and say, look, we're Americans. We have this Constitution. We believe in something. And today we don't believe in anything. We're nothing. We are literally a nation of nothing. The Constitution doesn't matter. Do the American people know that? The Supreme Court made a decision. The president said pound sand, and there's nobody in the street. The president withdrew from the last remaining arms control treaty. He's actively building up the American nuclear arsenal. There's nobody in the streets. We're getting ready to go to war against Iran in total violation of international law, but the president says he doesn't believe in international, only his own moral authority, in total violation of the Constitution, and there's nobody in the street. The American people are sitting on their fat asses at home doing nothing because they don't believe in anything. To go in the street, you'd actually have to be a believer in the Constitution. You'd have to actually say, I believe in this. This defines me. This is who I am. But we have allowed ourselves to be wrapped in this cocoon of comfort. We're addicted to Xbox and this fantasy world, the digital information that corrupts the minds and everything. And my God, all they have to do is keep throwing pornography at us and keep throwing, reality TV, and we're entertained and we don't do anything. And so that's where we are. And so Trump's going to get away with everything because nobody is going to oppose him, because to oppose him, you'd have to believe in something. You have to say, I believe in this, and I'm willing to fight for this, and I'm willing to die for this. I could go out today and make that. I'd be standing alone. I mean, I asked people to go to Central Park to protest against the end of New START. I asked people to rally in Washington, D.C. We got 35 people willing to rally in Washington, D.C. outdoors. 35 people. In 1982, they got 1 million people in Central Park to say, we don't want nuclear war. Ladies and gentlemen, let me show you Central Park. Do you believe in saving the world? Why aren't you there? Put 1 million people in Central Park saying, hell no, we won't go. Something that shows me there's a moral compass, but no, we just sit at home and we do nothing. We'll get on the dumb box and we'll just sit there and scroll through and look at little kittens slap each other and little puppies rolling around, whatever we look at on this that dumbs us down, and not thinking at all that on Monday night or on Sunday night, we could be out there killing 27-year-old female journalists whose only crime is they're trying to tell the truth.
Scott Ritter, thank you very, very much for a comprehensive interview about the situation with Iran and many other topics. And we thank you for your time and your generosity tonight.
Well, thanks for having me. I wish we had a more positive conversation, but it is what it is.
Tell it like it is. For Consortium News, CN Live, and the world this week, this is Joe Laura saying goodbye until next week.
Get out your notebook. There's more.
If you are a consumer of independent news, then the first place you should be going to is Consortium News, and please do try to support them when you can. It doesn't have its articles behind a paywall. It's free for everyone. It's one of the best news sites out there, and it's been in the business of independent journalism and adversarial independent journalism for over 2 decades. I hope that with the public's continuing support of Consortium News, it will continue for a very long time to come. Thank you so much.